What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York, calling from the quarantine zone again, and this time we got Austin of the Almighty Eunoia. Thank you so much for your time today, man. It's great to talk to you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's actually been a pleasure with the attention we've been getting from the song and the release so far. So it's pretty cool to be able to talk to you, man.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, with this debut, this is the debut album that's released as well, right?
So yeah, that was released earlier this year, and a lot of things went wrong with it, but we pushed through and we got it out, and we were all pretty proud of it. But we knew that like immediately because of like the time it had taken for us to get it done, that like when you work on music for such a long period of time, especially like say you start a song at the beginning of the year and you keep working on it, eventually you're going to keep finding the things wrong with it, and you're going to go back and you're going to want to change stuff. And that's kind of what we kept doing with this. And eventually we were like, we need to put this out. Like we need to be proud of it. And we were. And once we put it out, we just knew we immediately had better ideas. So we were like, we need to get, another song out. And that's what tonight's night was, is immediately turning around and reinventing ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. Do you feel like tonight's the night is almost kind of like a clear representation of the sound of Eunoia, or being, because listening to the debut album and to go from a song like, Deadly Premonitions to Devil's Vessel to, Visions, and so it almost seems like there was a lot of different vibes and a lot of different sounds. So, do you feel like maybe tonight's the night, the big single, is almost a clear representation of Eunoia in a way?
Um, so yeah, with everybody in the band, we all listen to such a wide variety of music. Um, a lot like some of us listen to like some really really mainstream pop, and some of us are listening to deathcore all the time. And one of the things that we really like is being able to represent like ourselves, like as in as many different ways as possible. So like we have a song, the song Visions, like you mentioned, which is a like the heaviest song we've ever released. There's no singing in it. It's basically a 2 minute breakdown. There's a lot of orchestra in it. And then there's another song off the album called Ember, which is all singing, and it's all just like it's like a ballad basically. And we just like to represent like our craziness in as many ways as possible, and we're also like all pretty versatile musicians. So with tonight's the night, we were like, hey, okay, if we're gonna reinvent ourselves, what if we showed that like all in one song, where it starts off kind of like ballady, and people are like, oh, this is gonna be a softer song, and then it ends with this unruly breakdown with no bounds and absolutely no predictability to it. So we thought it'd be cool to represent ourselves. And another thing, like you said, like from song to song, our sound kind of varies. And going into the newer material, it's way more dramatic with the amount of like variation from song to song. So like you're gonna hear that song, and the next thing we release, you're gonna be like, okay, this is not that at all. And then once we put out our next release, I want people to be able to be like, okay, so the first song on the album is really cool. The second one hit me by surprise because I didn't expect it after that first song. And then the same thing with the third one. Like we don't know what to expect from the singles.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I feel like, if it's good to be able to experiment too, because I think with every song that you make, it
Mm.
opens up doors for what you're going to incorporate next, right? It's not like you have to stick to a certain formula. It almost seems like experimentation is part of the sound of Eunoia, right?
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that we're going for in our next album, as opposed to our first one, which was like the first one was like, hey, let's have a metalcore band slash rock band meets like Hans Zimmer, and it's just like epic rock the entire time. And then the next one, we're gonna say like, okay, each song has its own individual theme. So instead of being like, hey, this one needs to be epic, and obviously this one needs to be epic, and this one needs to be epic, like, okay, what if we make this one have like a bunch of big band like jazz parts in it? And what if we make this song kind of sound like it's a game show, stuff like that. So we're just trying our best to make the songs as unpredictable as possible, but at the same time they all sound like they belong together.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. If you make like a song that's just straight up heavy an album that's straight up heavy all the way through, people are going to say it's repetitive and it's formulaic. And if you experiment too much, people will argue that it's directionless. But I feel like you really created something that, has many different vibes and many different atmospheres, but I feel like you also developed an identity with it. So I think it has the best of both worlds in a way.
Yeah, I always put like I have a couple examples that I'll always use with like local musicians because so many people are like, oh, I want to start this really cool like proggy metal band that does this and this and this, and it's like, all right, you can do that, and like, but like if you want to be marketable to any degree, you kind of have to sell yourself a little bit and make yourself, be able to be like listened to by someone who's not a musician. Like if you go to a Periphery show, you're gonna probably be able to be like, hey, what's your band? What's your band? And everyone's gonna have a band in that room. Where maybe if you go to like a top 40 rock artist concert, they're just gonna be like, I don't know even what the words he's saying. I just like the sound, stuff like that. And with our music, having like that experimentation and having that sense of unpredictability, like with our guitarist Kevin, he's probably one of the best guitarists I've ever met in my life. He can play anything. And another example like I'll use is like, hey, when you listen to that, I don't know if you know the guitarist Jason Richardson,
Oh, absolutely. I
but
interviewed
he
him
put out
2 years ago.
yeah, he put out his solo album, and it's awesome. Like I absolutely love it. Kevin loves it. Everyone loves it. But if he shreds for an hour straight, you're going to be like, whoa, this is no longer fun if he doesn't change it up. And with Kevin's ability, like, what if we randomly surprise someone here with a crazy guitar solo from Kevin? Like, okay, this song has been pretty gentle the entire way through, and bam, let's hit it with like this blistering guitar solo that no one expected. And people can be like, oh, I forgot that they have a guitarist that can even do that stuff, because sometimes they just write catchy stuff that doesn't even have like a lot of leads in it. But I like to add stuff like that to make a song special here and there, because if we just write the same sound, we're always like, all right, we're gonna do verse chorus guitar solo. It's gonna be predictable, it's gonna be not fun. And of course the guitar solo might be cool, but like if you knew it was coming, if you knew Kevin was of course going to break out a solo because he's great at guitar, then you just expect it. It's not as fun as opposed to like, okay, this song has been pretty, whoa, what the hell is going on right now? That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that I like in music too.
Does it ever happen with a preconceived idea, or is there kind of like a lot of trial and error and kind of like experimentation, happy accidents, as I like to say?
So like, are you talking like with like whether or not a song deserves like a ton of leads or something like that?
Yeah, yeah, or with anything, with the structure, the arrangements, lyrics, anything. Do you ever go into it with like, okay, it has to be like this, or do you kind of just does it happen fairly organically?
So with our newer material, there's almost like a theme in place before there's any music. Like with Tonight's the Night, it's based on Dexter. I
Great
was like,
show.
okay, I wanted to show the soft side of Dexter because he's actually a very loving guy when he's around his family, but he's a serial killer. So we kind of need to do really soft and really heavy at the same time. The beginning of the song, I was like, okay, it'd be really cool to reference the blood theme from the show. So that piano part, if you play that next to the blood theme from Dexter, you're like, whoa, that's very obviously supposed to be that. So I go into it basically like, I want that piano part, and then I want it to be soft and then crazy. That's it. And then I'll sit down. I actually do write a decent amount of the music too. So like I'll usually sit down and demo like a skeleton, and then I'll sit down with Kevin, Jacob, and Ryan, and we'll be like, oh, okay, actually, I see what you're going for. Let's do this. Sometimes I'll definitely be like, hey, this theme, I think it'd be really cool if we did go batshit crazy and just absolutely just tear it up the entire time. And then like, how about for this song, we go really radio rock and add some synths and stuff to it as opposed to like strings like we're usually known for.
Mm.
So just there sometimes is that theme that dictates like, hey, it'd be cool to go in this direction. And then, if it changes, it changes. But usually like I have like ideas, like songs all the way planned out in my head sometimes where I'll sit down on my computer, have the demo done in 2 hours, and the guys are like, where the hell did this come from? It's like I wrote it in here and then just had to put it on my computer. That's basically all it is.
I've always said, and I love that you use the theme Dexter, because that, first of all, that's a great show Phenomenal show. I've always said that
I love
Dexter,
it.
and I'm not even kidding when I say this. It sounds like I'm making it up, but I'm not. I've always said that Dexter is metalcore as a TV show because of the contrast that is throughout that entirety of the series. Like, he's great around his family, he's a fairly charming guy, but, he's also a serial
Mm,
killer. So when he's around his family, we're in the clean chorus. When he's doing what we know him as, that's when we get the breakdowns and stuff. And
yeah,
yeah. Do you feel
yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, would you feel that maybe like having a theme in mind or maybe even a concept could help influence the music as much as it would obviously influence the lyrics as well?
Yeah, so what we did with our first album is originally conceptually for the band, I wanted to make all of our albums like a concept where it was a story from first song to the last song, which is what the first one is. So I went into that album being like, hey, okay, so we're gonna make sure it's all about, the same thing. And then I wrote the music, and then I was like trying to figure out like which song was about like which part of the story. It kind of it got lost in my brain sometimes. It's like, oh, now I feel like, I'm writing the same thing I wrote in that song or something like that. Where like now what we're doing is we're going to base each song off of like its own story, but still base it off of something. So Dexter, I was like, okay, what if we uh, base that off of Dexter? We'll make that crazy. We base this off of that. I like to associate this sound with, what I think that theme is, or, just put themes to different, sounds, or sounds to themes, and then kind of write it around like that.
Mhm. Is there room for the music to be open to interpretation, or do you try to engage the listener into the story? Because I almost feel like from what you're explaining is like the story is almost as essential as the music in itself too.
Yeah, so things with like Dexter, like I lyrically I'll put in, puns and jokes and play on words. Like there's a line in there where I was caught in a Harry situation. It's like, okay, Harry's his dad, Harry is his son. And then chopped up into pieces and shoved in a hefty casket, hefty bags, stuff like that. Where like if you listen to the lyrics, you're kind of like whatever, but like if you dive deeper into them, you're like, wait a second, that means that from that show, or like it. And some of the other songs, people will be able to read through the lyrics and kind of be like, okay, I see what he's referencing, So there's kind of like that predetermined, like, okay, I'm gonna leave it up to interpretation a little bit, but if you really want to dissect the lyrics, it is about a very specific thing.
Yeah. It seems like you attack it from both like a metaphorical and a very literal way.
Yeah, the very original concept of the band before it was called Eunoia was to be something where like every song had a very, very literal meaning, but it was written in a way where like anyone can take it and apply it to themselves, because the lyrics weren't too absolutely like this is what it's about for everybody. You have to have it. You have to understand it from my angle. So like with the Dexter song, I kind of tell you like, here's our little story, and it goes with the music video. It's kind of just like, imagine the entire show as Dexter. It's collapsed into one song. So I kind of like that, where like our songs now are kind of like, here's the beginning of the story, or like kind of a continuation. So like, oh, tonight's the night that happens again and again, and by the end of the story, he kills a serial killer, and then he does it again, stuff like that.
And do you
So
think
I
that
like having one story just kind of like as its own thing in a song.
yeah. And do you think that maybe because you collaborated with Spencer from Ice Nine Kills as well, and being that their last album was very horror movie conceptually
Mm.
driven, do you feel that maybe that almost kind of made you and Spencer sort of see things eye to eye and maybe relate to each other even more, and that's what led to the birth of the kick-ass track Armageddon?
Yeah, Armageddon was a cool track because we from the get go we knew that we wanted Spencer on there, and we're friends with the guys in Ink. So like we knew from the get go that we wanted to do it. So like part of the breakdown is actually referencing one of their songs. But when it comes to like seeing eye to eye with him, I think probably very similarly, because I grew up listening Ice Nine Kills, I got into them in every trick in the book, like a lot of people probably did, because like they took something that's so popularly loved and made it something catchy. So when you listen to that song and maybe you've read those books or you've seen the movies that are based on the books, you might be able to listen to that song and kind of picture that in your head. So like I hope when people listen to Tonight's the Night, they can like even if they didn't watch the music video, which is a very clear representation of what it's supposed to be, if they don't see the music video, they kind of see in their mind like Dexter wreaking havoc on someone's life because of what they've done to someone else's life, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Is there almost kind of like when it comes to like getting that source of inspiration, is there like, do you like look for it? Like, is there a lot of research that's involved, or does it just like come out of the blue in a way?
So, it there's been a little bit of both. With the new material that we're writing, I had a general theme for the entire album and then the individual stories within the album. And when someone had said like, hey, a friend of the band was like, hey, what would be you need to really watch the show Dexter. And I was like, I don't even know what Dexter's about. And that was like at the beginning of quarantine. Like I'd never even saw Dexter. So one day I sat down, watched it, and then I finished the show in like a week and a half and was like, hold on, pause all of the other songs. I've got an idea. And I sat down. I remember being at, work a couple of days and like having melodies in my head. And I'm like, all right, this is going to work. I think I've got, I had like the lead for the verse that I had that in my head. I came home one day and I was like, I have to do it. I have to sit down and write it. And the song, almost to a T, what you hear from the released version is like what I demoed that night. We rearranged a couple of things, but I remember like finishing that demo and like I got chills up and down my spine. Like, oh my God, I have never done anything this cool before. And I showed the guys and they were like, this is what we're releasing next. I don't care what you say. And I was like, all right, let's do it.
I'm glad your bandmates were just as thrilled about it. Like that like to simply scrap it and start fresh.
Sometimes, sometimes they have to deal with like my utter insanity where I'm like, hey, I've got an idea. And like I'll start writing something and they're like, I don't know if this is gonna work. And I'm like, shh, let me flesh it out and then we'll decide whether or not it works. And usually I get to a point where they're like, all right, that's pretty badass, I'm like, yeah, just hear me out. I know what I'm doing. I'm insane, but I'm like clever and insane at the same time. So I know what I'm doing, I promise.
I got an idea is either the best thing you can ever hear in a band or the worst thing you'll ever hear in a band sometimes.
Yeah, I've got an idea is definitely either leading to your best song or like a terrible breakup that's making headlines.
Exactly. And that should be the headline for everything. Instead of breaking news has been like breaking idea.
Yeah. The band member had an idea, didn't go so well.
That's normally the case, but trial and error, it's art. It writes itself. Sometimes it goes into directions that we may not expect it. I feel like art is almost like a living thing in itself, where maybe you did create it, maybe you brought it into the world, but simply you're also its humble guide in a way where you also have to let it breathe and be able to maybe form itself in one way or another.
Yeah, that's why like some bands out there who like to do covers very frequently. I love when a band does a cover, even if the cover turns out like, if it's such a beloved song. Like I think like yesterday or maybe the day before, August Burns Red released a cover of Chop Suey.
Yeah.
And, like I'm sure everyone's so over listening to Chop Suey, but like when a band can like throw their own flavor onto something and like put it out in the world and be like, hey, I respect that person's art so much that I want to try my take on it and put it out in the world. So like we very occasionally do covers. I think we've got like one or two planned, but it's just songs that we appreciate so much that we're like, hey, even if everyone else hates what we do to the song, I kind of want to put it out in the world and be like, this is kind of what like goes on in my head when I hear this song. So maybe you guys would like it too. If you don't, that's not why I make art. I make art for me, and if you guys like it, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, which is awesome. You have to make stuff. I think we all become artists because we feel something in the world, we see something, we analyze it, and we all experience things, and therefore we discover different mediums of expressing that. And I think that's the beautiful thing about art, is that it could either resonate with other people, or it could, you know, be people might find it not to be very interesting or not resonate with it as much. But that's the beautiful thing about it, is that it creates an experience.
Yeah, that's what I really liked about that Ice Nine Kills album, Every Trick in the Book. That was the album that really got me into him. And when I had gotten the CD and like the vinyl, I remember looking through like Spencer's note that he left like inside the lyric booklet, I think. And he was like, "Hey," he was like, "I grew up off these stories. I love these stories so much." He's like, "I think about them so often, that like we thought it'd be really cool to bring that to a modern audience. We think like we can probably portray these songs in the way that the writers would like to hear them." And even when they did their follow up album, The Silver Scream, when they didn't include Scream, which was one of his favorite movies, he specifically said, "I didn't want to include it because we couldn't quite crack it at the time." And he didn't want to portray it in a way that like he didn't want, like he didn't think that like the makers of the movie, like Wes Craven, would want it to be portrayed. So eventually when they actually dropped it as like an additional single after the album came out, they were finally like, "We think we got it the way we wanted it to be originally," you know.
Hmm.
So I think giving yourself that time to portray what story you want to portray the correct way. Like even with us with Tonight's the Night, like I worked on those lyrics for quite a while just to make sure that like I was saying exactly what I wanted to say correctly, and the music was moving exactly the way we wanted it to move. So when we released it, it's like, "Hey, we love that story, so here's what we think you guys, would enjoy about that story. Here's like our synopsis, I guess, of the entire idea of Dexter in one banging, catchy metalcore song."
Do you find it though, maybe like the longer you're working on something, the harder it is to kind of like capture that moment or maintain that emotional spark, or even create an element of consistency in the song if you are working on it for a span of time?
Um, so when it comes to the writing in the band, like I said, I do a lot of the demoing and writing on my end, and like I just have like a section in my brain for each one of the songs that we're working on, and I do work on them for a long period of time. And sometimes I'm like, that this one out of the collection of songs doesn't quite stack up to the rest of them. So I'll sit down and be like, what is it about that song that I really like? Is it the chorus? I like the chorus in that song a lot. Everything else is kind of not so memorable. So maybe I'll sit down, I'll demo out a completely new song with the same chorus and be like, this one hits just right now. Like, we're always open to it. Like, hey, what if we get JD from Ice Nine Kills to sit down with us and be like, "Hey, here's what I hate about your song," and like actually help us get it fleshed out. But usually we're pretty happy with our stuff ourselves, to the point where we're like, "Okay, maybe tweak that note. Oh, I think the chorus needs to be a little bit catchier. Let's work on that melody. Oh, I really don't like that breakdown. Oh, I think that the song is like way too long. I think it's way too short." We'll hammer them out together.
Hmm.
But I'm pretty proud with my writing for the most part, where when I present the guys with a demo, everyone's like, "I got a couple changes because just how I would play it, but like other than that, like this is a pretty catchy idea, or this is definitely a good starting point."
I almost consider it, I don't know if you would necessarily call it a talent per se, but like I almost envy the ability, or the discipline rather, for an artist to either lay down a specific piece of work at a time, and come back to it later, or present, tweak things here and there, like, because I feel like if you're satisfied too quick, that could ultimately damage it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've had like anytime we've like finished a song, like with Tonight's the Night, it came together so unbelievably quickly that we were like, "Whoa, okay, this," and everyone in the band was just addicted to getting that song finished. But like at the same time when we were working on that, I have like a chapter in my brain always focusing on one of the other things. So when I listen to demos in the car, I'm honest to myself. I listen to our music as if I'm a consumer, because who cares if I think it's like from I made this, but like I also, as I said, I make art for myself. So if I'm making it for myself, I have to want to listen to it, So when I listen to our demos, like I have to listen to it and be like, that's it right there. Because right now we've got like 6 of them that I'm like, this is game changing, but the other ones aren't stacking up just yet. So I have no problem continuing to work on them, because inside I know what the problem is. So I'm just trying to figure out the best way of attacking that problem on like an entire song, because at this point there's nothing in there where I'm like, we just need to scrap that song. They've all got something so valuable about them that I just need to figure out exactly what it is that I need to change to make that song just leveled out with everything else. Because one thing that's super, super important to me for our next release is that there's not a single filler song. I don't want anyone to listen to the album and be like, I don't want it to be a common consensus that like track number 11 on that song, garbage, but everything else, great.
Yeah.
I want everyone to be like, yo, every song is unique, every song is catchy, they all have a different theme going on, and they're just, the album's not complete without one of them. I don't want people to think that they could, delete, if they have like a digital download of the album, they're like, oh, I just skip that one all the time, or I just deleted it from the album because I never listened to it anyway. I'm sure we all have that artist that we're like, I absolutely love everything they've ever done, but like that song is trash,
Yeah, definitely. Quality over quantity. And the final question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And the final question I wanted to ask you is actually, and this might actually be the longest, I guess, answer we'll get, or just part of the discussion. But we've referenced metalcore a lot, which is a genre that I freaking love, and but like I've always asked people, what is metalcore to them? Because when I ask fans at shows define metalcore, the prevailing theory is that, oh, it's music that has singing and screaming in it. I'm like, okay, so are you gonna call In Flames metalcore? Are you gonna call Opeth metalcore or Fear Factory? Like metalcore, I would say, is started with Shadows Fall and Killswitch Engage and All That Remains, but metalcore nowadays people would think is a band like Parkway Drive or Ice Nine Kills or even Asking Alexandria. For you, what do you think makes metalcore metalcore? Like, where do you think that definition comes from?
I mean, honestly, like you can go on a forum or like on a Facebook group and like just like post the word like, this band is like the status, like, hey, this band is this genre, and like no one's gonna agree with you. Like they're just gonna fight because everyone's always talking about genres. Like, so to me, metalcore, it's just kind of the title we gave our music, because like if people are like, hey, Eunoia is a rock band, I'm like, sure. I recently, someone shared our video and they were like, this is my favorite gent band, and I was like, okay, I'll take it. We're not gent at all, I don't think, but like if you think we're gent, then we'll definitely sit on your gent playlist, I guess. So people can call us pop rock all they want to, but at the end of the day, all the genres are anymore, because there's so many of them and there's so many subgenres. All genres are to me anymore are a reason for some people to complain that like this band is this, not this. Like you said, if I go on Facebook and I'm like, oh my God, In Flames is my favorite metalcore band, I'm sure I will get like 3 death threats immediately.
Yeah, just like when Slayer put out Diabolus in Musica and people were going around saying Tom Araya is my favorite rapper.
Yeah, I mean, I just saw a status. I don't know if it was actually a post from a bigger page or if it was just a status from one of my friends, but someone was talking about like gent as a genre and how like Meshuggah, I guess, created gent, and they were like, when you think of gent, like you think of Meshuggah, like do you think that there's any other band, after Meshuggah is no longer an active band, that will take the throne of like the kings of gent? And I'm like, who gives a crap?
Yeah. Well, first
like,
off, I think Fear Factory
like,
invented that guitar tone, to be honest, but that's a debate in itself. So
yeah, exactly. There you go. So like when people are like, I think I think Periphery is actually the first band that did gent. And there's always the people that are in there like, well, Meshuggah was kind of doing low tuning. How about this band? And then you'll find out like the first gent band was the Beatles, something like that. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like metalcore to me, that's just the title we decided to call ourselves because iTunes made us call ourselves something.
Yeah, yeah. My favorite is where like a band says a word and then just adds the word core at the end of it. That was the trend when I was in high school. Like they say a word and add the word core at the end of it, and then you go on Wikipedia and there's like maybe two bands in that whole genre.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna start calling our stuff just horrorcore and just say like me, Eunoia, Ice Nine Kills, and Motionless and White are just horrorcore. I don't care.
Dexter core.
That's just what we are, I guess.
Dexter core.
Yeah. Dexter Core. We'll take Dexter Core. I actually think someone might have called us Dexter Core on this release. I think that might have happened.
Well,
it might have been me. I don't know.
I don't know. I didn't steal it in case anybody asked. But
no, I mean, you can have it. You can say Eunoia is my favorite Dexter Core band. I don't give a shit.
There you go. There you go. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today. Great to be able to talk to you. The album is amazing. Is there just anything else that you would like to promote for the band in terms of like live stream performances, new merch, or when can we be expecting some new Eunoia?
I mean, we do have some cool Dexter themed merch designs on our website. You can just find us at eunoiami.com. We'll have links to all of our stuff on there. There's special things on there like the orchestral version of the song. If you like that kind of stuff, you can get it off the website there. As far as new stuff, we're always working. Like I said, like if we weren't on call right now, I took down my whiteboard that's usually right here that has a couple grid marks talking about what songs needs what work on them, but I think we have something that we're gonna focus on for a little bit, and we've got a couple people that we're trying to contact for mixing and special like extra like synth elements and stuff. So right now we're definitely focusing on something, but because of like the holidays, I'm kind of letting everyone have their space because not everyone's as nutty as I am when it comes to writing. But yeah, I mean, earlier next year, I think that we'll probably have another thing brewing, another cool video, hopefully, that people end up really liking, because they ended up really liking the last video, so I guess I got to start editing more of our music videos. So
awesome. Keep busy. Now's the time to keep busy. But thank you so much, Austin.
Yeah, I mean, always. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Everybody, we are here with Austin of Eunoia. Be sure to check out Elysium, the debut album. New stuff coming very soon. This is Alex from Heavy New York.